Guess what, folks? I'm back from the future! I'm just making it as a referencing, but in forms of Back to the Future, like, imagine if I was gonna be getting myself my DeLorean, that funny forms of how I've got myself my, scientific look to me. So anyways though, hey, what is up everybody? I'm Mario here once again, and I'm back for some more of the Maxi Toys videos, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to more Let's Play of Super Mario Odyssey for the Nintendo Switch. So, last time we actually did manage to collect about 12 of those Power Moons in the forms of the continuation of the forms of Wooded Kingdom, and today for this video is the fact that we're going to be exploring through the new kingdom in this game, but in forms of the Lake Kingdom. So, yeah, let's see if we can able to get ourselves, tons of Power Moons around here, but even then though, that's as far as I can majorly, go with this point and onwards. So, the first Power Moon we're going to be getting through is to able to actually collect one of those notes in the forms of swimming underwater, because yes, as far as this kingdom applies, that we're gonna have to be able to swim a lot in this particular kingdom itself. So, and just like the ones in both the Cap Kingdom and the Cascade Kingdom, basically we got ourselves 50 of those regional coins that we're about to be grabbing through, and yeah, we can able to actually just manage to capture this little zips, even though we can actually traverse through different hidden areas right here, for instance, like the forms of these little regional coins, as far as you already saw that coming. And, yeah, there's not much else I can really tell for this point, even though that, although there was only one major objective we're going to be doing right there, and of course, we got ourselves yet another Power Moon on the lake shore. It's very easy Power Moon to get, because even though I can definitely tell for this little shiny part of this particular edge of the actual corner, but even then, yeah. So, today was actually forms of the 18th of May, 2018, so that means today that, Hyrule Warriors the Definitive Edition on the Nintendo Switch has been just recently released today. And, I've heard so many good things about the forms of the Switch version already from the start though, which we've already established that several amount of times, that I really do appreciate it that the Switch versions of this particular game that now actually features a swapping mechanic ever since during the likes of the 3DS version of Hyrule Warriors Legends on the forms of the 3DS versions. And right there we got Cat Mario right there, in this case the 8-bit rendition of the Cat Mario power-up right there. Well, it's nothing more accurately a cat power-up per se in this game, because it's more accurately just an Easter egg. So, because it does have a lot of references, but in forms of, Super Mario 3D World and all that stuff, so yeah, you get the idea. So, yeah, as far as I've managed to able to actually, whenever I was trying to get into the Switch version of the forms of Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, it does retains like 60 frames per second in some areas, but even then, during cutscene, playing, but in forms of, when you're about to be watching some of these cutscenes, in the forms of Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition or something like that, sometimes it runs like 30 frames per second or something like that, but even then, I might be wrong about that, but even then, I'm also able to actually keep on, looking up the footage and speak for itself before we're able to actually just manage to able to talk through more on, Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition. Now, I've already established that before, that I'm probably not going to do that, version just yet, though, because of two things, most likely, though, because, oh yeah, because there's another Power Moon right there. Treasure in a spiky waterway. So, yeah, it's pretty easy to actually obtain that Power Moon right there. So, anyways, though, the reason number one being is the fact that I haven't, still haven't completely done with the Wii U version and the 3DS versions of these games of Hyrule Warriors, so that way I can get a lot of practice before I jump into the actual Nintendo Switch versions. And, second of all is the fact that I probably should save, Hyrule Warriors for the Switch Let's Play in the forms of next year, so even though I was one of pointing out right away. We don't know exactly there's going to be a giant marathon coming up in during the likes of the next year, besides, well, still more continuing of the forms of the Kingdom Hearts retrospective, but in forms of, trying to celebrate with the forms of Kingdom Hearts 3's release. Cheap Crossing, but in forms of this particular Power Moon I've got. So speaking of Cheep, we can now able to actually take control of the Cheep, and to make matters even greater than that, is the fact that you can able to actually breathe underwater infinitely. So even then, you don't have to worry about the the air meter this time around though, which I found is really cool. But even then, it always like reminds me of the forms of what's the game that usually utilize the infinite water segments in the forms of, oh yeah, in the aquarium park from Sonic Colors, if you manage to able to actually obtain one of those fishes surrounding you, I believe it's actually based off from Act 6, if I can expect so for that much. And basically that if you manage to able to get all kinds of fishes all around you, it helps you able to breathe underwater infinitely. So even though that's absolutely very good. Even especially noticeable, just like the ones in this game, except unlike the ones in Sonic Colors on the Wii, that normally you can able to actually breathe underwater for a certain amount of time, or in this case, just breathe underwater infinitely if you manage to get those fishes around you. But in this game, you have to able to capture the Cheep before you're able to actually breathe underwater infinitely. So taking notes in the cliffside. So yeah, there's another one of those power moons that we've got. So now we've got ourselves 20 of those regional coins there. So even though not too shabby right there, because even though there's not much else to be said for this part though. So there's one thing I should probably able to actually explain this though actually. That recently I've heard the fact that during the likes of in the March 2018 that we've already had some little bit of a discussion of the forms of Okami HD coming onto the Nintendo Switch. Well, thankfully though, it got a release date in the forms of Japan and also the forms of the English versions as well. And basically it's going to be released into at some point in August, which I do know there's actually the English versions of that release date is going to be coming out in the forms of the 9th of August. And then as for Japan though, I might consider say probably the very beginning of August, I'm assuming this much. And yes, just like the ones in the PlayStation 3 version, specifically on the physical release of the forms of PlayStation 3 version in Okami HD for the PlayStation 3, that normally Japan got the physical release, whilst in our countries, we have to get that in digital only. So it might actually retain the exact same format, but in forms of how it does in the forms of Nintendo Switch this time around though, because Japan, for some reason they got not only for downloads, but also the physical release as well. So even then know that I'm not sure why Japan only versions only gets the physical releases, whilst in the countries sometimes doesn't have physical releases in our countries, I don't think. But even then, we'll find out until that time period as far as time goes. But even then, I'm probably not going to pick up Okami HD on Nintendo Switch though, because even then, I've already, basically, we've already got ourselves the Wii version of the game, just because of how the fact that it's really, good usage of the forms of motion controls is involved, especially noticeable with this little, celestial brush, which that could be same applies, but in forms of the Nintendo Switch version, you can either use the touchscreen, just like how it does in the forms of Okami Den from the Nintendo DS, or you can able to use the Joy-Cons as the motion controls, just like the Wii version of the forms of Okami. And even you can actually use, I'm presuming if you actually use the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, then you can able to actually just use the Celestial Brush, but in forms of the right analog stick or something like that. Although I may be wrong about that, but even then, we'll find out until then. So, woo! Okay, so we got ourselves the next power moon right there, so we got ourselves the Super Secret Zipper. Because yes, as far as this area suggests, is that we're going to be getting a lot of usage on the zips. So even then, we have to capture the zips quite a lot. So yeah, that's what I can usually say about this though. And besides from that, I was originally going to be really excited until whenever it gets like a final piece of DLC of the forms of Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle for the Nintendo Switch. And originally they're trying to say that it's going to be releasing it at some point this spring, mainly in March, April or May. But I do have one question about it though. Where is it? You know how the fact that in the forms of Nintendo Direct Mini, just like how it does in the forms of, Super Mario Odyssey's free update, but in forms of, well, we've already discussed upon this and several times already. There's a Luigi's Balloon World in the forms of that specific update, which it did release that and during the likes of at some point in February. I would say at the very end of February or presuming or something like that. But even then, compared to the likes of Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle for the final piece of DLC for the season pass though anyway, that usually features Donkey Kong as a playable character, and especially with the new world. And they were originally trying to say, okay, unzip the chasm, that's what the mission's called. Anyways though, I was really hoping that the release date is going to be making as a classification confirmed, but in forms of release dates of the forms of some of these DLC packs. They have no luck into it at all, because even though they... At this point, we're on May the 18th, I've already mentioned about this before, because of, Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition has been just recently released. So, anyways though. And yeah, I'm feeling quite in a good mood for this point today, because even though, unlike the ones that... I don't know if you noticed for this point, folks, but I wasn't exactly in very good mood in the last week, because even then... Okay, we got ourselves a Powerman right there from the Broken Pillar, which, as far as the mission's name is concerned, that might be the case. So, yeah, because of that though, joining about a week ago, there was a film that I absolutely despised the most. Well, similar to the likes of the crappy Emoji Movie, because F that film. That could be same applies for this film what I was going to be talking about, and you guys should know what I'm talking about. It's Sherlock Gnomes. Which, even though it's basically more accurately a God-known version of Sherlock Holmes, which even then, he's a very interesting detective, but in forms of Sherlock Holmes, but in forms of internationally, or in this case around the world in reality, and even especially noticeable but in forms of the actual history about him, because he's normally a detective in London, which even though that's mainly the case here. But, I just had a strong sense of feeling about the fact that with the unnecessary sequel to the forms of... Well, I wasn't really big in the fan of the forms of, Romeo and Juliet type of films like this, like the God Unknowns come to life whenever the people's not involved in that. Because of that, though, it's almost like a Toy Story ripoff to me, though, because even though it does the exact same thing. Well... At least in the first film is pretty okay. I mean, not the best I've ever seen. I mean, yeah, I would say I probably should take Harry Potter and the Deadly Hallows Part 2 for 2011 any day. Especially noticeable by the forms of, well, not Cars 2 though, because Cars 2 is easily the worst Pixar films that's ever been released. So, anyways though. Yeah, back into what I was saying, but it forms about the fact that, the Sherlock Gnomes, which is a pretty unnecessary sequel to the forms of, Romeo and Juliet, and, let me tell you, it sucks. Because of that, though, they have so much, potential about the fact that, well, unnecessary jokes, and especially noticeable that it just feels rather dull to me. But even then, though, that's only because of how the fact that why is there every time when it was like those films showed up in it, at least as far as my own life is concerned, it's gonna be freaking bad to me. Like, even then, that's besides the point there right there, but you get the idea. I should probably explain about this actually, is that recently, during the likes of 2 days ago, I've recently managed to watch myself a brand new film, but in forms of Deadpool 2. And from what I've heard about Deadpool 2, as far as the Rotten Tomatoes reviews on that film, but in forms of the really hilarious sequel to Deadpool, but in forms of, the same developer, but in forms of, Marvel Studios films and stuff like that, it did actually receive quite well actually, but in forms of 86%, which even though that's actually really gone way more higher than the likes of the first film was. I mean, sure, the first film was actually still great, but in forms of the receiving scores is the forms of 83%, at least as far as I'm majorly concerned with this. So yeah, I'm very glad that I'm now able to actually see Deadpool 2, which I'm not going to spoil the ending for this point, folks, because I know there are some Marvel films out there, in this case especially noticeable if those of you are a fan of Marvel superheroes. I'm probably not going to spoil the ending for you, because even then I'll let you guys have some opinions of that film and see if you can able to find out for yourselves. So, but seriously, don't watch, I repeat, don't ever watch Sherlock Gnomes, because even though that unnecessary sequel sucks. Even though it's almost like it's somewhat similar to how it does it in Cars 2 for shame. But even I know that's as far as I can say about that stuff. So, anyways, let's bust out this little zip, and we can be able to get ourselves even more region coins there. So we've only got 30 out of 50. So let's just hopefully we can get some more here. In fact, we've almost nearly towards the end of this particular mission objective requirement when it comes to the stories. You know. Okay, so let's see what's in here. What's in the box? Well, of course, it's obviously a power moon after all, so there's no point for able to actually noticing that. It's quite, you know, it's pretty obvious with this particular reward there. And, yeah, let's go ahead and get these 4 regional coins there. So even though that should be easy as pie to able to obtain them, rather. Sorry for a little bit of a tangent right there. So, if we go over there, we get ourselves the next obstacle courses we're gonna have to deal with right there. Especially noticeable how the fact that this particular objective right there is that we need to able to grab onto ledges. So, yeah, that's how we can able to deal with this particular, well, you know, for this particular platforming sections notice. So, and I think there's gonna be some region coins in this section, I believe. So if we turn onto the left, and basically we can able to find them. Yeah, there we go. Another thing I'd like to discuss upon for this point, folks. During the likes of yesterday, that not only because of how the fact that, well, not only that, Okami HD managed to finally get the release date in the forms of Nintendo Switch version of Okami HD, but in forms of, for the Switch version I was going to be talking about, that's going to be releasing until August. But, for some reason, they've actually built up yet another announcement trailer. Now, you remember there was a game called, Go Vacation on the Nintendo Wii that originally came out on, you know, 2011. Well, 7 years later, they managed to able to make the Go Vacation all the way onto the Nintendo Switch now, so... Gee, I wonder how that version is going to be proved upon. Well, I haven't really owned the original version of, you know, Go Vacation because I wasn't really interested on those kinds of stuff. But even though that, I don't know if how the fact that I might as well able to actually pick that game up because even though I wasn't really particularly that interested, so I might as well just pass on that, so... But I don't know what that's going to be released though, but I'm presuming it might actually retain the exact same release date as of how it does in the forms of the original Nintendo Wii version counterparts, but I don't know exactly for sure about that yet. So, if we go up there, we got ourselves this particular power moon, jump, grab, and climb some more. And that doesn't stop there, because we've got ourselves a second power moon that we can able to obtain, which is not that far from here, so let's go ahead and obtain that. Jump, grab, cling, and climb. So I think that pretty much does it for this area. So, yeah, not too shabby. Okay then, so we've now pretty much done from here, and, well, I guess there's not much else to really think about for this point, folks, because even I know that, well, besides the good thing about coins is that they actually respawn those coins instantly, so even though that's actually really, really great. The greatest things about this, so... Yeah, I think we'll take a break on missions from now on, though, because we have to concentrate onto the forms of the, you know, the mandatory missions, so, yeah, Water Placid, terrorists, so, you know. Okay, so it looks like we're gonna have ourselves a rematch of those Brutals again, so, you know, you get the idea. You're too late, we already got the Lush Lady dress. And even matches the boss's, Tokodo. So, no way we're giving it back. Oh, is that you gonna say so, mister? So anyways, here we go with this particular Brutal right there. I don't know exactly what his name is though, but I'm also able to actually research on that as soon as we're able to proceed for this game. Basically, he's very simple. Basically, we need to able to, once again, we need to able to actually reflect the actual, one of his special attacks he able to actually perform by the forms of actually using this little saw blades in his hat, and then basically what we have to do is basically we need to actually toss Cappy onto the forms of this little saw blade hat, and then once you've done that, it will just slowly tipped over by the forms of this particular flower trampoline of any kind, and that way we should able to actually deal with some of the damage. Well, in order to actually deal the damage on this particular Brutal right there, is to able to actually stomp onto his head, just like how it does in the forms of any other Brutal battles. Even I know. That's all I can really say about this point for that point. So yeah, that's as far as I can see how this will turn out. So Yeah, he's pathetically easy, just like before, so even I know that. Of course, this is the early points of the game, so even I know there's nothing else to talk about for this point here, so... There we go, now we've actually managed to claim ourselves the multi-moon, perhaps maybe the only multi-moon in this particular kingdom at this point. So naturally we've pretty much done here, so Boodles over the lake. Because that's what the normal regular mission is called there, so every time when you actually, first start off the forms of Lake Kingdom. So, since we've actually managed to complete done with the Lake Kingdom, everything else is being restored and it's well pieced in within. So, in addition to the forms of this particular staircase is now added in, and even especially noticeable by the forms of that specific areas that we can now able to do more stuff here and there, but in forms of, you know, there's actually, if you couldn't tell right there, oh yeah, something's worth mentioning though, this is where we're able to actually introduce to ourselves these little, hint arts. Now, if you see this little button right there, it normally has a little bit of a weird button as far as you might see there. That's how the capture button comes into play. Depends on what controllers you'll be using, either the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, or even especially the normal Joy-Cons, if you will. There is actually a capture button, which even then, if you manage to able to press those capture button, basically it'll take some snapshots into your album, which even then, this is a prime example of how the fact that this game, it utilized the capture button, and same applies to how it does it in any other, Nintendo Switch games nowadays, because even then, that, well, unfortunately, unlike the ones in, Nintendo Wii U Miiverse, that you can't able to actually send photos to anyone. So if that's the case, then we have to basically do it without it. But I digress. So let's go ahead and just see what is up for here. In fact, let's go ahead and grab those regional coins there. So we've only got 9 more left of those regional coins to able to be found here. So even now, I don't know if I can able to actually get all of the regional coins in this particular kingdom, but I might as well try my best if I manage to able to do that. So yeah, unfortunately I got hit right there, so that's a little bit of a waste of opportunities there, so... But who cares about that anyway, though, for me, though, as it is, because even then, though, you know, it's way too easy to able to actually get yourselves a life hearts throughout, so let's go ahead and just process Lakitu. And just like the ones in, you know, the forms of, Sand Kingdom, basically we have to do the exactly same mechanic, but this time around, though, on this small little, well, water we have to able to actually deal with right there this time around, though, as opposed to how it does in the forms of these, you know, some sand that we have to deal with for this point. So, yeah, just like the likes of from before, we need to able to spot at the forms of the bigger cheap drop shadow, because if you do that, then there's your chance to able to actually get yourselves the nice, glorious, precious power moon. So, that's how it goes for this point there. So, yeah, it's insane though. Whenever I first heard about the forms of Go Vacation was going to be coming back onto the Nintendo Switch, which even then I thought it was going to be like, you know, kind of an odd decision to make. But even then, that's how it happens. That's how it happens. So anyway, so lake fishing. Alright, so we've done with that, and I've noticed something that I've already technically done this before, although first off, let's go ahead and anticipate it by the forms of these timer challenges really quickly. By simply going onto these platforms, or my personal favorite is to ignore the platforms and just swim all the way down to the deep end. And there we go, it's pretty easy. Timer challenge 1. I'm assuming timer challenge number 2 is going to be at the exact same area as when we actually did manage to fight one of those poodles right there, so... Yeah, I could at least expect him to recognize them, so... Anyway though, so let's go ahead and just, I think we actually still off by one, piece of these little moon shards right here, so... But again, just like the likes of the, one of those missions in the forms of Wooded Kingdom, it actually saves your progressioning, but in forms of those collecting those moon shards right there. So even though that's the only good thing about it. And since we've already collected all 5 of those moon shards, then we've basically gathered this power moon right here. Moon shards in a lake. So naturally, we've only got ourselves 20 of those power moons now. So we've only got about... I don't know how many there are though, because there were a few times though, whenever I just managed to concentrate on the forms of the capture card software, sometimes some of those texts can be extremely small, even especially noticeable how, well, it's nothing too much of it pixelated, so if I managed to hit the microphone by complete accident, so I do apologize for that. Because, it's so hard to tell if I was going to be reading through something. So anyways, okay, so the next, power moon we need to get is that, you know, this particular island right there? That we need to be able to actually use Cheep Cheep from, which we've already technically done this before, but now since we actually got ourselves this particular, little curved little object underneath this particular donut looking, island right there, and that way we can able to actually get ourselves the power moon, because again, we do need to deliver the Cheep Cheep, which first needs to be captured, by the way. I meet a lake Cheep Cheep, so yes, this is how you're able to actually do this, so there we go, that's the objective done. Okay, I've already been there before, because we've already, been there before, so much so, but hey, at least as far as I can usually just say about this, though. And since this rock has now disappeared, now we can able to actually enter this room now, so, oh god, it's one of those puzzle, elements level like this, so, jeez, I gotta figure out how to do this, though, because, again, it's been about a couple of months or a couple of days since I've actually coming back into this game, because even then, though, because, you know, way too busy on certain Let's Plays here and there, like, you know, Kirby Let's Plays and all that stuff. And even especially noticeable that, although originally Sonic was supposed to be coming back into the forms of, you know, Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, but, before we're able to actually jump into the next game in the forms of the Kingdom Hearts retrospective, well, before when, Kingdom Hearts 3 is about to be getting itself the release date at some point, which is still currently scheduled until when it still says about 2018 at this rate. So even then, we don't know exactly what the final release date is going to be like. But even then, we'll see what happens there until this year's E3. Well, to be more specifically, on the 11th of June. To be more precisely from that, because even I know that I keep on thinking of Nintendo's E3 2018, because even I know that still should be up until when it gets to the point until, you know, the 12th of June, which is going to be really, really chaotic, so still looking forward to it though, but I've heard there are some news about, but in forms of the E3 2018, of how the fact that sometimes any other websites, especially in internet around here every nowadays, always attempt to able to actually post it those little particular leaks if it's either real or fake, which even then, that maybe seems the case for this particular points like this, even though it does the exact same ways as how it does in the forms of, well, I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna have to quick out right there because I have no idea how this puzzle works, but even then, before I discuss upon more of the this particular E3 2018 stuff, all we have to do is basically we need to figure out which one of those pathways we need to take, but in forms of how the fact that we can able to do this puzzle successfully. But even then, as long as you know what you're doing right there, and as soon as those two connected, then the mission is accomplished. So, but even then, it takes me a lot of practice to able to do one of those puzzle type missions like this, but there we go, a successful repair job. Well, it might take a little bit of a while though because of my depth perception, or even especially noticeable for that. Sometimes my isometric view skills wasn't exactly that intrusive to me though, but I could have appreciated to able to actually maneuver my right analog stick to make things easier for me, but I just did not know for myself though, you see that, so... Okay then, so before we leave this area, I don't think there's anything up there because, well, it's really impossible to able to actually just reach higher up. But in forms of the, you know, higher height and all that stuff. So speaking of which, but in forms of the Nintendo's E3 2018, it's gonna be making itself this final name of the forms of this particular E3 2018 conferences. But, I considering this more accurately calls it Nintendo Direct E3 2018, somewhat similar to how it does in the forms of Nintendo Direct, E3 2013, which is about almost 5 years from now, which even then, it might actually discuss upon, like, you know, more upcoming games coming out for it, and especially noticeable with new tons of infos and all that stuff, and, especially noticeable the fact that, oh, before we get into this, actually, this is the reason why, as you can see right there, I've managed to get myself that specific, swimming suit on, and as a result, this can be only accessed when you're able to actually wear that costume, and then, as a result, throw Cappy onto this particular glowy part onto that specific, wedding item, and there we go, that concludes that particular mission. I feel underdressed. So, yeah, because of that, though, it informs of the comparisons to the forms of the past few years, in forms of Nintendo's E3 conferences, but in forms of, well, in 2014 and 15, both got the forms of digital events. And while the 2016 doesn't have the forms of those specific specialists here, but in forms of, Nintendo Direct and especially noticeable with the Nintendo digital events and all that stuff, because it mainly focuses on both Pokemon Sun and Moon and also The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, originated for the Wii U, but it wasn't until October 2016 they managed to get ourselves the forms of the, Nintendo Switch version during that time period. So, okay, I believe that might be a bad idea for me though, because I'm might as well able to drown myself if I manage to keep doing that. But on the other hand, there's actually another way we can able to do that, and that's the forms of, trying to able to actually capture this particular Cheep Cheep right there, because, it's very easy to able to get, to swim down a little bit more deeper than the likes of normal regular Mario, because the thing is, though, is the fact that every time you actually swim downwards, even especially noticeable with the deep end comes into play, you lose your air meters, even though I just want to classify for that such, so... speaking of such though, is that the fact that speaking of The Legend of Zelda, I've recently managed to pick up myself by the forms of the next The Legend of Zelda game, by the forms of Nintendo GameCube. Because of that though, it's been a long while since I actually managed to able to got myself some more Nintendo GameCube games, ever since last time I've actually got some more Nintendo GameCube games since, I would say Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, because of the forms of, the retrospective of the every single Metroid games before Metroid Prime 4 will be on its way on Nintendo Switch, which even then though, we'll see more of the infos about that game, including the likes of the actual gameplay footage or something like that. But then again, we don't know exactly for sure about this yet, which even then I'm still looking forward to that though. And yeah, that's all I've got. So anyways, actually, before you're able to actually discuss upon this actually, yeah, because of that though, as I was saying, one of the GameCube games I've actually got now is the forms of The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventures, which even then, I've played about that, for quite a bit, and it plays almost exactly similar of both the combination of both Four Swords and especially noticeable in A Link to the Past, because even then, I say A Link to the Past because, well, the environments of the forms of Four Swords Adventures are slightly similar to how it does in the forms of, The Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past. Oh, we actually come across into this new type of kingdom right there. And by the looks of it though, we actually ended up in this particular food paradise going on there, but we can't actually interact around here for quite some time at this point because we haven't got to this far of the game, so... But at the moment, we've only got just only one Power Moon right from the start though, which I believe that kingdom is actually known as the Luncheon Kingdom, which sounds a little bit of a odd name per se for a kingdom like that. But hey, at least I'm very, very, very excited to be able to actually explore for that kingdom. Well, it wasn't until when we actually get into the very close to the very end of the game. Well, to be more specifically, if you don't be bothered to actually go ahead and grab the majority of the Power Moons themselves, so... Anyways though, because there's another Power Moon right there, end of the Hidden Passage. And at this point, we've only got about 25 of those Power Moons. Not a lot of Power Moons per se though, but in forms of this particular video anyway, because I can expecting so that compared to the likes of how it does in the forms of the Sand Kingdom, that if you always attempt to get the more of the majority of the Power Moons the most. But as for this kingdom, it's a bit of an average amount that we've actually got, so... Could've, would've, should've, but it doesn't matter to me though, because again, I might as well able to come back to this level again until when there's like some more stuff to do, but in forms of, after when you've beat the main game, there's gonna be some more tasks at hand, and even especially noticeable how the fact that, actually I think there's actually one more mission I might as well able to do from now on though, and because of that though, this is the reason why we need to able to capture Cheep Cheep right there. Ah, good thinking. No air needed. Yes, Cappy, because I already explained to the audience before how the fact that they don't have to worry about the air meter anymore, so even then we can just swim down as the Cheep Cheep itself. But of course, you do need to uncapture the Cheep Cheep though, because townspeople thinks that the enemies are the worst. So swimming with this backpack is tough. I don't even know how I made it here. Oh, but I discovered this power moon here. You can have it. Thank you, Captain Toad. I really appreciate it. Let's go swimming, Captain Toad. But even then, though, because of that, though, that he carries his backpack for the entirety of his journey, which even then, though, he never refuses to take it off, though, which even then, though, could be possible if how the fact that he will become playable character in the forms of, you know, Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo Switch, if he managed to able to take off this, backpack off, which even then, I don't know if exactly it's gonna be possible way, but even then, we'll find out soon enough, so even then, yeah. Yeah, I guess that, I think we're gonna have to, just stop things up for this point right there. So even then, we just have to leave this, kingdom for now, because I'm pretty sure we've done quite enough. So even then, I need to know how much, power moons that we've got. I'm presuming we've actually got ourselves, well, I would say 24 power moons, per se, as far as the actual, list of descriptions for it. But ultimately, though, it's basically just 26, because even then I'll be expecting the encounters by the forms of the multi-moons that we've got. So, in order to actually move on to the next kingdom, is that we need to collect about 8 of them. So, let's see how much that we've got. 170. Not bad there. And the Odyssey is now powered up, so now we can able to move on. But in forms of the next kingdom, all the way to the distance right there. Gee, I wonder what the next kingdom is all about. We have enough power now to make our way to the next kingdom, which is the forms of the Metro Kingdom. So yes, I am really, very excited to able to actually able to jump into this. Sorry, I can't speak today, folks. I can now finally jump into this specific kingdom, because even now of all the kingdoms we're going to be exploring through, this might actually be one of the best looking kingdoms in the entirety of Super Mario Odyssey, which even I know this is one of the most highlights of the forms of, you know, the entire game itself. So, but first, before we're able to actually continue on with this kinds of stuff, we got ourselves our dialogue to read through. Whoever heard of that wedding with a stolen dress? Let's go after that treacherous fiend. Which is, to be more specifically though, Bowser, can't be for surely. So, okay, so, well, here it is. Now then, let's see what's in there to see in the Metro Kingdom. Can't wait to see how this place turns out. Goodness, what was that? So it turns out that we've immediately stopped any forms of the Cloud Kingdom instead of the Metro Kingdom, because we've actually bumped into Bowser, including the likes of his airship. So what that means, it might actually look like we're gonna have to do a one-on-one fight between me and Bowser himself. So, anyways, join me next time on Let's Play Super Mario Odyssey for the Nintendo Switch. Is the fact that we're gonna be facing off against with Bowser in the forms of the Cloud Kingdom. And that should be good to go for this point. So yeah, see you guys next time. Later, fellas. Really love the environment.